Donald Trump found guilty on all 34 counts. Donald Trump has now been convicted of 34 different felony crimes.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt.
All right, you guys, I'm on my way to go put some money on Donald Trump's books, so I'm probably going to keep this kind of brief. There's probably not going to be a lot of editing. What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Before we get started, I'm just going to ask that you like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to comment just to help me on the algorithm, but you don't know what to comment, just put a knife. Because if you can't tell by this hat, some people are definitely going to come for my neck. All right, so I did a live earlier today and I joked about how Donald Trump has now secured the Black and Latino vote because he's been found guilty on his 34 charges. I'm sorry. I laugh, but it's really not that funny. But everything's funny and everything is silly to me. And I know that some people get like, how can you joke about this kind of... You're not my audience. So for the people that easily get triggered, I am not for you. I don't know how you started following me. I thank you for the time that you did follow me, but it's probably time for you to go now. So I say all this to say, even though I know it may feel good for some of you, to be like, Trump just got found guilty on 34 charges, blah, 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 and you're celebrating. But what you've really done is turned him into a martyr. So now he's able to put up his notice that he is what did he say? He's a political prisoner, I believe is the term he used. And people are going to eat that up because whether you realize it or not, Trump has built his reputation on being the underdog, which is, again, something people will dispute and they'll say it's ridiculous. But as far as Trump, the political candidate, he has been an underdog. And trying to tell us that Joe Biden has nothing to do with this, I don't know anybody that's dumb enough that would actually fall for that. But if you can find people that will fall for that, maybe talk to them about it. But I'm not that person. What I will say though is that you're just making it so his people that also feel like underdogs and also feel like they're not being represented are going to make sure to show up to the polls in November. That has been guaranteed now. So you better have your rigging game on point is what I would think, because the numbers that are going to come out to actually support Donald Julius Trump. I know it's not Julius. I just love saying Donald Julius Trump. I even tried to start a rumor on Twitter at a point that his middle name was Julius. That's what the J stood for. And nobody went for it, but it was super fun and people were laughing at me for being ridiculous because I am ridiculous. But yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe I sometimes still pull for the left in certain ways. Not when it comes to Biden having another term at all, because I just don't think he's good for the country. But sometimes I do wish people on the left would learn to listen more and be what it is they claim to be. I mentioned that I couldn't support the left because of the way that they preach kindness and compassion, but then what they show is otherwise. And one of my followers asked me how I can say that and support Donald Trump. And that's because with Donald Trump, he doesn't pretend that he is particularly sensitive and caring, but then at the same time, he's doing Donald Trump type stuff. Donald Trump is a troll. I'm a troll myself. And sometimes I want a president that represents me. I like the trollishness. I like the silliness. I like the irreverence. And some people are going to be like, but not for a yeah, I like it for a president. And you may have a different idea of what you want a president to be. I like Donald Trump as president. I think he's fun. But maybe that's entertaining for TV. Shut up. I'm so tired of hearing people talk down to me because they think they know better than I do what I want. I've tried it your guys' way. I voted for Obama twice. I don't regret voting for Obama, but at the same time, there's a different way that a politician like Obama works that Donald Trump does not. And I will continue to talk about the kinds of things I've talked about when it comes to the LGBT community and stuff like that. But specifically when it comes to that, I don't know how anybody can agree so heavily with me on those matters, but then still think that I would vote for Joe Biden. To me, that makes no sense because Joe Biden has been nothing but accommodating with the LGBT crazy that's going on right now. So I'm not really sure where anybody got confused. I once talked about the fact that I might vote for DeSantis if he was an option. DeSantis turned out to be kind of off his rocker. Well, not kind of. If you ask me, he turned out to be off his rocker. I think he's good for Florida, but I don't live in Florida, so I don't really know that to be a fact. But it seems like what he's doing in Florida would probably be the right route for some of the things that they're going through. And sometimes it's like that. Sometimes a politician is great for a particular area, but might not be great for the United States in general. And I really have always supported Donald Trump from the beginning, and I thought I was always clear about that, but apparently not. So this is me being clear about it now. There are other videos where I've been wearing Make America Great Again hat. I have a white one as well. I also have a bucket hat that's Make America Great Again. So I don't know where anybody got confused, but that's not my point right now. What I wanted to do is for the people that will continue to watch or that are hate watching right now because they think I'm some sort of traitor or whatever it is you think, I would really ask you to look past your own thinking and understand that part of what goes on with me and lefties or Democrats or however you would put it is that there is an unwillingness to listen that comes from that party. And a lot of people would assume, me being brown and gay, that the resistance I would get would be coming from the right. But that is not what I personally have dealt with, because if you don't know the way that my career in stand-up comedy has gone, is that for the LGBT community, I didn't carry the right message long before I said I was voting for Donald Trump. Me even having a sense of humor about being LGBT or LGBT issues was considered a problem to the left. And I am a person that jokes about absolutely everything. That would be including death, including what some people would consider really tragic situations. I joke about absolutely everything. That's the reason that I'm a comedian. I'm also able to get laughs off of those things. So it's not like I'm joking about them in some esoteric way a lot of people wouldn't get. I am very relatable. But what happened was when I first started doing comedy, I wasn't carrying the right message for the LGBTQ community. And then there were Latinos that didn't agree with gay at that time or were strongly against it at that time when it came to the Latino clubs and Latino shows. And then I got offered to perform in actual redneck clubs, and that's what I started doing, was performing in redneck clubs and redneck bars and performing for what would be predominantly Republican or at the very least right-leaning audiences. And those people were always very good to me, very welcoming of me, and most importantly, willing to listen to the things that I had to say and take them in even if they didn't agree with them. Where people on the left would like to tell me, not only as a gay man but also as a brown person, what it is I'm supposed to think and what it is my concern should be and the way that I should feel about immigration and the way that I should feel about transitioning kids and the way that I should feel about gay pride. And if I don't submit to being Latinx or Latine rather than Latino or Chicano more specifically, which is what I am, then somehow I'm doing a disservice not only to my people, but to the world and the country in general. And that's something that I just can't get behind. I can't be told by liberal white people what it is I'm supposed to think and how it is I'm supposed to feel. And a lot of liberal white people do not function in the neighborhoods that they'll live in that have in a lot of cases been gentrified and been for the most part taken from people of color. And I say this as a person that, if you don't know my history on that, during 2016, I was living in the MS-13 neighborhood. I lived one block away from MacArthur Park, which if you want to Google MacArthur Park and see what MacArthur Park's history is, I lived one block from that. And because I'm brown, and at the time I didn't have tattoos on my face, but I had tattoos everywhere else, and it was easy for me to blend in because that neighborhood is not as much Mexican but El Salvadorian. So even though I'm Mexican American, there are a lot of people that look like me in that neighborhood. So there are certain parts that I get to see that they will keep away from white people, because when you're a brown person and they assume that you're similar to them, and in a lot of cases I am, I don't try to act like I'm better than other brown people. I don't try to act like I'm better than other Latinos. Some people will say that just because I don't speak with an accent or because I do actually speak proper proper English. There are people that will say that I try to be white or I'm trying to be white, but that's not ever been my thing. I've always been very proud to be specifically Chicano, which if you're not familiar with Chicano, Chicano is Mexican American, which that title of Chicano was taken from us at a point because it was decided that Chicano had a negative connotation. So as Chicanos, we were asked to no longer go by Chicano and instead go under the bigger umbrella of Latino. But I personally still identify as Chicano because it lets other Latinos know exactly what it is that they're dealing with when they meet me. But one thing that I don't think a lot of people understand when it comes to immigration specifically, because that's one thing people will hit me with, is they'll bring up Donald Trump and they'll be like, what about what he said about Mexicans? What about what he said about people like you? And they really do come at me like that. When I do the dramatic voice, that's really the way that they come at me. And I would remind them, he said,
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
well, nobody sent me anywhere. I'm second generation on my dad's side, and my mom's side has been in Arizona since before Arizona was a state, which if you know the history of Arizona, Arizona didn't become a state till 1912. So when you're brown like this, but you're that American, you don't really have a connection. Also, what he was talking about was technically true. A lot of what was being sent over wasn't the best. And there's a difference between what he was talking about and what a lot of people picture. But what people don't understand if they don't live in specifically Latino immigrant heavy neighborhoods is in a lot of cases, it is the hardworking and honest immigrants that are the biggest victims to the bad immigrants in those situations. And there are also situations where immigrants get mistreated because they don't have any legal recourse, and apartment buildings know that. To give you an example, the apartments that I lived in were rent control. I had been there for 3 years at the time that I met one of my neighbors who told me the entire time he had lived in his apartment, his plumbing had always had problems, and he had been there longer than I had been there. Anything that I ever needed done in that apartment complex got fixed like that. And I brought up the fact that I lived there for 3 years at that point under rent control because I was still paying less money than him. So under rent control, you would imagine that if he got there before me, he should be paying less or at the very least the same amount by that time or around the same amount. But he was paying significantly more than I was paying, and his apartment hadn't been repaired in all those years. Well, why do you think that would be? That would be because he doesn't have the same legal recourse that I do. Because if they do that to me, I can go to the housing authority and make that an actual problem. And then some would say, well, LA is a sanctuary city, so that doesn't apply. Well, here's the other thing you don't know, is a lot of Latinos or immigrants don't feel comfortable reporting anything because they know that at any minute the laws can change, and now they've given up their full address, phone number, all contact information, and can possibly be taken away. And that's the reality of what a lot of Latino immigrants deal with. And I keep specifying Latino immigrants because that's what I've dealt with. So I'm not trying to speak for all immigrants or speak to the problems of all immigrants. But when it comes to Latino immigrants, that's something I've seen up close. Also, I have uncles that aren't legal in this country, and I've talked about that on my podcast before. But these are things that people will not listen to. So then people are like, well, doesn't it seem inhumane that Donald Trump would talk about taking them back or sending them back? But when we have a Democrat in office, like we have Joe Biden right now, people sweep it under the rug, and there's really been no talk about any kind of reform when it comes to immigration. So I would rather have Donald Trump bring it up in a negative way and have it so people realize that it's still there and it's still a problem that people are dealing with, rather than sweeping it under the rug and leaving these people with not only no path to citizenship, but also nobody even thinking in that way. So I say these things, And I know that some white liberal will jump on and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about and completely not listen to anything I say because they're so caught up in Trump derangement syndrome that they want me to take on their panic. But that's the other thing people don't understand about a person like me is I do not live in panic. I have never lived in panic. That's not a luxury that I've had for my entire adult life because I have been in a lot of dangerous situations, which may sound dramatic to you guys, but you also don't know the kind of life I've lived. I've really exposed myself to a lot of things that I don't think a lot of average people would necessarily understand. And I would recommend that nobody live a life like mine. Like now I live a much more chill life. I still end up sometimes at places that may not be the safest, but that is becoming less and less the older I get and the better I get at weeding out what it is I do and don't want to be around. But there will always be a part of me that's kind of ghetto, and I do like that part of myself. But I think for this one, that's enough. I don't really know if I'm going to record a lot of Donald Trump centric material coming up. I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about that isn't this, but I figured that maybe I would come on and just explain that to people. And if you're really against Donald Trump, I don't mind that at all. That's your choice. I don't expect my followers or the people that watch me to vote the same way I vote or think the same way that I think. But if you think you're going to try to beat me into submission, into thinking the way that you think, unless you're gay and brown and have lived through the exact same experiences as me, which would make you me, I don't need you to tell me the way that I'm supposed to think, or you're gonna pull up, I'm so disappointed in you. Look, I'm a little old for your disappointment. You feel however you want to feel about whatever you want to feel about, and you play that guilt trip with your kids. I have never looked to anybody that's ever hit me up on social media or in my YouTube comments as a mother or father figure. I have a mother and I have a father. They're voting for Donald Trump as well. Thank you for watching. As always, this has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. This hat has been hanging up on my coat rack for a while, so it's a little pressed down right there, I think, but whatever. It is what it is. Does that look more Mexican? Do I look more Chicano right now, eh? What's up, eh? Look like Super Mario.
They bought into his bullshit.